Hi everyone. So with what's happening in the Near East and indeed around the world, the issue I'm going to be talking about may seem trivial. It may seem like there are bigger problems, and some people might even say that, Nathan, by talking about this, you're just giving the individuals more oxygen. Um, well, that's the reason I don't talk about it all the time. It's been a little while now since I made videos about Just Stop Oil. And actually, part of the reason was I myself had felt they'd sort of faded away. Their activities seemed to be a little bit um, toned down in recent weeks. Sadly, not. I was wrong. They are still very much here. So, in their latest stunts, they have targeted a dinosaur exhibit at the Natural History Museum. Apparently, this was on loan from Argentina. So, that brings another country into it. Um, and two medics, so called, covered this in a sort of orange paint substance. One of them claimed it was just flour. Yeah, a dinosaur model. It was a replica, but no doubt that will cause damage. The museum is going to have to then clean it up, presumably using some sort of material that Just Stop Oil wouldn't approve of. And on the same day, I think this happened earlier today, or it could have been yesterday, I'm not sure, to be honest, exactly when, they targeted Wellington Arch in West London. A beautiful monument, a sculpture to this country's patriotic past. Um, this is their targets, a dinosaur replica and a monument. We're not talking about the Shell headquarters. We're not talking about ExxonMobil or some big oil conglomerate. We're talking about um, artwork, sculptures, statues, etc. Apparently, recently there was a plot that they would disrupt Strictly Come Dancing. Now, I give a lot of credit to whoever unveiled that and ruined their plan because it didn't go ahead. Um, Peter Blexley on Talk TV said it was journalists uncovered that, so good work. Because by exposing it, it obviously ruined their plan. They wanted it to be a big surprise. But what does that tell you? Strictly Come Dancing, I don't watch it myself, my mum does, but it's a popular show, so they're directly targeting people's entertainment. You know, People work hard, they have a long day, they want to come home and relax, and then their program gets interrupted by this cult. It may sound trivial, but when you consider that these people are directly hurting others via basically messing with people's lives, messing with what people have, the little bit of escapism that people have with entertainment, messing with transport, people trying to visit relatives, go to important appointments, funerals, weddings, baptisms, you name it, medical appointments. I I really loathe Just Stop Oil. I think that they are beyond obnoxious. And it's a different kind of extremism because when you have, for example, say Islamist fanaticism or far right extremism, that's kind of, it is what it is. It's hateful and it's promoting a very poisonous ideology. But with this group, there's something different about it because they're not violent in the same way. And in fact, they're not violent at all in the sense that they're not throwing, Molotov cocktails. They're not planning explosions. At least not yet. I wouldn't put it past them because my concern is there could be dangerous offshoots that might think, well, this has been failing for 4 years. We need to do something more radical. That's my concern. So they're not violent in that sense, but there's something kind of sinister about them and something sinister about a group that is so widely loathed, really. So many people have contempt for them, not just people who've been directly affected by them, but many, many others. I mean, I don't drive, I don't live in London. So you might think I've got no personal reason to have animosity to them, but I so why do I? It's because I have empathy for other people. You know, I'm not a selfish idiot. I have empathy for the people who have to clean these things up after them. I've got empathy for those people whose day is being messed up because of the selfish actions of these exhibitionists. But I do think there's a very, very cult-like thing about them. Peter Bleksley said that, and I think he was absolutely correct. I mean, we need to look at what is a protester, because this is something I have a very big problem with, just calling them protesters, and I think the media is guilty of enabling them by constantly doing so. A protester is someone who has strong views about a particular issue, right? A particular policy, for example, and they feel so strongly that they would go to the street to demonstrate. And the purpose is to lobby the government, to pressure the government or some organization, to try and spread knowledge about the issue, to try and get the public on board. That to me is the principal point of protest, to voice opposition in a democracy. But what did Just Stop Oil do? I wouldn't call what they're doing protest, because vandalism is not protesting against big oil companies. It's not protest. If they were to vandalize, say, Shell headquarters, I'd still condemn it. I'd still say, well, it's a criminal act, but at least it would be more direct. But how the hell does vandalizing a dinosaur replica carry their point? It's insanity. It's. I think that when you see them interviewed, there's a doomsday mindset there. They literally believe that we're all going to die in a few years. Some of them will claim they don't believe that, but if you look at the sort of people that are being sucked into this movement, I think there is a degree of grooming involved, because I think you get some teenagers in it who are vulnerable. And I really don't think it's much different from an Islamist group or a far right group grooming young people, scaring them. It's a form of proselytizing, which is extremely dangerous in my view. But they don't want any solutions. They're not talking about supporting green businesses or trying to find some sort of sustainable future. Um, I don't think they give a shit about the flooding in Libya, or the tropical storm that's just hit Mexico. I think they're actually narcissists. I think that they're motivated by self-interest. They want to make themselves martyrs. They see themselves as political revolutionaries. Um, and I think they get a kick out of it. I think they get an adrenaline rush out of it. Um, which is why, sending them to jail, one problem with that is jails are actually overcrowded. Now, I'm pretty hard line on crime. I'd like to see them go to jail, but there is a practical problem there. Jails are overcrowded. So, but, if they weren't sent to jail, they see themselves as political martyrs. They almost want to be sent to jail. In fact, when the COP21 summit happened in Glasgow, they were disappointed that there weren't more arrests. That shows them the mindset of these people. Um, so I honestly think it's time to favour more direct punishment. For example, if they vandalise something, make them clean it up. Why can't that be adopted? In the States, and there's a lot of things about America I'm critical on, but I'm actually a fan of some of their creative punishments, because I think sometimes it is more directly relevant to what has happened. So, for example, um, if they vandalise something, make them clean it up, but make them clean it up with a toothbrush. Not proper like cleaning equipment. Make it so strenuous and so dull and so tedious that it will just, they will really think, like, make it last hours and hours and hours. Now, people might say, well, they'll be sentenced to community services, and that's tedious as well. But I don't know. I think something more direct. I would honestly, if I were the government, I'd be looking at ways to freeze their bank balances. Now, I'm sure there'll be a lot of legal questions about that, because, there always is. But at least look at it, at least see what is viable. Freeze their bank accounts, because these people are getting funded. It's illegal to fund terrorist activity. It should also be illegal to fund criminal activity. So they're getting these crowdfunding appeals. They're getting, probably millions coming in from Hollywood celebrities, from millionaires. I would honestly look at freezing their assets. At least look at what could be done. No doubt they'll shout about their human rights. They don't give a damn about the human rights of everyone else. This is why I have a big problem with the likes of Liberty and other groups that claim to be all about democracy. They are utterly ignoring, when they stand up for these groups, the fact that they are interfering with the freedom of everyone else. they are actually violating the liberty of everyone else. They're violating the liberty, for example, of little school children who are going to the museum to see a dinosaur exhibit. You know, that might sound trivial. I don't think it is. This is everyday things, you know, that shouldn't be taken for granted. And what these vile idiots are doing is they're messing with people's lives. And, you know, I understand the philosophy that if I talk about them, they want attention. This could be counterproductive. But unfortunately, just totally ignoring them doesn't really work either because, you know, they will still find ways to get attention and they'll still find ways to. I mean, I suppose you could argue if there's no interviews, if there's no coverage, they get no attention, that's it. But unfortunately, these things are newsworthy. You know, they can't be ignored because we live in an era where people have smartphones and, you know, things are recorded. So unfortunately, even if media outlets didn't report this stuff, they would find a way to, you know, or the danger there was they might do even something more extreme. Um, but I honestly think that they're a cult, and I think that they. I mean, how can you even begin to address the mindset of someone who doesn't care about being hated, who doesn't seem to understand that their movement has utterly, utterly failed. Now, if their intention was to get publicity, I suppose you could argue they've succeeded in that. But in terms of, you know, forcing the government to go to net zero or whatever or stopping oil contracts, they've utterly failed, utterly failed. And even if Labour takes a softer line on that, Keir Starmer isn't going to risk publicly supporting these people because he knows how reviled they are. He knows that the vast majority of the public are against them. So I think he'd be politically astute enough not to openly support them. I think pressure needs to be put on him to return donations sent from supporters of Just Stop Oil. These people need to be polarised. They need to be marginalised. They need to be treated with total and utter contempt. They need to be stigmatised. Why? Because they've declared war on the public. They have declared war on this country and its heritage. I don't think that's hyperbole. Um, and you know, this is going to affect people's mental health. The people that they're impacting, you might say, oh, well, someone's just had their day ruined, it's nothing. But when this happens over and over again, I think it does start to have an effect. You know, even militant suffragette activity didn't go on this long. The peak of suffragette activity was 1913, and there was actions in the years leading up to that. But when World War One came, it just totally evaded. Now, I'm not saying we need a world war to drive these people away, but this has been going on for 4 years. 4 years. Extinction Rebellion and its offshoots. 4 years. They've utterly, utterly, utterly failed. The majority are against them. Even people who are very big on climate change do not agree with their tactics. They're an utter failure. So why is it as a nation state we allow this minority of extremists to do as they please? I am pretty critical of the police. I think they need to be a lot more robust. Peter Blexley is a former Scotland Yard detective. I think he would agree with that. The police need to be acting. This actually taps into another issue about where the Metropolitan Police are now. There was heavy criticism of the failure to act against Islamists shouting for jihad on the streets. And it's a similar thing with this. They failed to take robust action. Now, the police might say they don't publicise where they're going to, you know, unlike other groups, they don't say what they're going to do. You know, so there's a degree of truth in that. The police cannot be everywhere at once. I appreciate that. So I'm not expecting the police to be just there waiting for them. But when it does happen, this is what infuriates the public. When the police do show up, it's a softly, softly approach. It's negotiations. Oh, you can't do this. Please don't do that. You need to. We're going to arrest you. Stop the negotiations. Stop the dialogue. Just drag them away in handcuffs. This is what has to happen. Because I think when the public has no trust in the police, and I think right now the Metropolitan Police are doing themselves no favours, that's not a good situation because the public then will start to take matters into their own hands, and then you'll have a vigilantism situation, which isn't good. But I suppose you could say that vandalism isn't as bad as blocking roads, but this is still targeted at national institutions, and it's an attack on British culture. Not specifically the dinosaur, but certainly Wellington Arch. So, one last thing, when the likes of Greenpeace and Liberty talk about the government taking away your rights to protest, what they're really referring to is the Public Order Bill, which was drafted and brought in precisely to deal with the likes of Just Stop Oil. So when people say that the government's trampling your rights, bear in mind that the government had to act because of public anger. Could the government have sat back and done nothing? There has been no abolition of the right to protest. We see protests all the time. That hasn't been taken away. What's being targeted is this particularly obnoxious form of protest, which is vandalism, which is locking on, which is directly hurting the public. And for that reason, I support 100%. If I ever thought that this government was basically having a blanket ban on protest, I'd have a big problem with that. But that is not the case. So Greenpeace and Liberty and other groups are being dishonest. They're not showing the public the whole picture. And therefore, they're guilty of enabling the likes of Just Stop Oil. Anyway, it's something for people to think about, but I try not to think about them too much because honestly, they really wind me up. I get very angry about this. Um, I just sympathise with Londoners because it's mostly Londoners who have to put up with them. Um, how long can this go on for? 4 years now. Can this go on forever? At some point, I think they need to be prescribed. And yes, they'll just change their name, but at least it will weaken them temporarily. Freeze their bank accounts. There needs to be more creative punishments than just community sentences because they don't care. They really don't care. So there needs to be more creative punishments, and they really, really need to be stigmatized. Wherever they work, they need to face dismissal. Maybe if their livelihood was on the line, they'll think twice about messing with the rest of us.